The little girl gripped the stranger's sleeve with trembling fingers, her frightened eyes searching his face as if he were the only safe place left in a world that had suddenly become too heavy for someone her age to carry. Her voice was barely louder than the evening breeze drifting through the hospital parking lot when she whispered the words that would change both of their lives forever. She begged him not to tell her mother that she was still alone. She begged him to pretend, just for a few minutes, that he belonged beside them. She believed it would keep her mother's fragile heart from breaking. What began as a desperate favor between two strangers became the beginning of a journey neither of them could have imagined, a journey built not on promises, but on kindness offered at exactly the moment it was needed most. Before we continue this unforgettable story, if you believe kindness can change lives, that second chances deserve to be given, and that love sometimes arrives when we least expect it, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes in hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to Kindness Speaks. Your support helps us bring more heartwarming stories to people around the world. The city never truly slept. Long after office lights dimmed and restaurants closed their doors, the emergency entrance of St. Matthew Medical Center remained alive with flashing ambulance lights, hurried footsteps, and people carrying burdens that could not always be seen. Among them walked a 34-year-old carpenter whose life had quietly fallen apart over the previous 2 years. His clothes were clean but worn from long hours of physical work. His dark brown hair had grown slightly longer than he usually kept it because paying for haircuts had become less important than paying rent. His shoulders carried the posture of a man who had learned to survive disappointment without complaining. He had come to the hospital only because his elderly neighbor had slipped on the apartment stairs, and after making sure the old man was safely admitted, he stepped outside into the cool evening air, believing his part in the night was finished. A few yards away, hidden beside a concrete pillar near the entrance, stood a little girl no older than 8. Her school sweater hung loosely over her small frame, and her backpack rested at her feet. Her long black hair was tied into 2 uneven braids that had clearly been hurriedly done that morning. Her eyes were swollen from trying not to cry. She watched every person entering the hospital as though searching for someone who would somehow know exactly what to do. Inside the intensive cardiac care unit, her mother lay connected to monitors after collapsing during a long shift at the neighborhood grocery store. For years the woman had worked 2 jobs, skipping meals and ignoring chest pains because every extra dollar meant another week of rent, another school uniform, another birthday cake, another chance to protect her daughter from the truth about how difficult life had become. Even from her hospital bed, she worried more about her daughter than herself. Earlier that afternoon, one of the nurses had gently asked the little girl whether any relatives could come stay with them. The child quietly admitted they had no close family nearby. Then the nurse had smiled kindly and asked whether her father might be on his way. The question stayed inside the little girl's heart like a stone. Her father had disappeared before she could remember his face. Her mother never spoke badly about him, but silence often revealed more pain than words ever could. The little girl understood enough to know that mentioning him always left her mother staring out the window for a long time. She feared that if her mother woke up and realized once again that nobody had come for them, the sadness might hurt even more than the illness. That impossible fear led her toward the stranger standing outside the hospital. The carpenter noticed her only after hearing the tiny voice asking whether he could help for just a little while. He crouched so they were eye level. Children rarely trusted strangers, and he sensed immediately that this child had gathered enormous courage simply to approach him. She explained everything in broken sentences, fighting tears after almost every word. She wasn't asking for money. She wasn't asking for gifts. She wanted someone to stand beside her mother's bed for a few minutes so her mother could believe that they weren't completely alone anymore. The request caught him completely off guard. He knew pretending to be family would be wrong. He also knew walking away would haunt him forever. Years earlier, after losing both his wife and unborn son in a devastating highway accident, he had spent months wishing someone, anyone, had simply stayed beside him during those endless nights when grief made every minute feel impossible. Strangers had offered sympathy, but very few had remained after the first difficult days. Loneliness had become its own kind of illness. Looking at the frightened little girl, he recognized that same loneliness. He could not erase it. But perhaps, for one evening, he could stand between it and a child who believed hope was slipping away. He quietly agreed. As they walked through the hospital corridor together, the little girl reached for his hand without thinking. It was such a natural gesture that it nearly broke him. Her hand was tiny and warm, trusting him with a confidence he felt he had done nothing to deserve. Hospital staff noticed the pair enter the room. Some assumed he was family arriving late after work. Others simply smiled, relieved the child no longer looked completely alone. Her mother slowly opened tired eyes. The exhaustion in her face was unmistakable, yet something remarkable happened when she saw her daughter standing beside someone. The deep worry that had been written across her expression softened. For the first time since arriving at the hospital, she smiled. It was not a large smile. It was fragile. But it was real. The carpenter instantly understood why the little girl had asked him to come. Sometimes healing begins long before medicine has finished its work. He didn't pretend to be anyone else. He simply stood quietly beside the child, offering calm where fear had lived only moments earlier. He helped adjust the blanket when it slipped from the mother's shoulder. He fetched water after the nurse gave permission. He listened more than he spoke. Every small act carried a gentleness that had become rare in a world constantly rushing somewhere else. The mother studied him with curious eyes, sensing kindness but not understanding where it had come from. She thanked him repeatedly for helping her daughter while she had been unconscious. He answered with humble words, insisting anyone would have done the same. Deep inside, however, they both knew that wasn't entirely true. Many people would have wished them well. Far fewer would have stayed. As midnight approached, doctors shared encouraging news. The heart episode had been serious, but because treatment had begun quickly, there was every reason to believe she would recover with proper rest and lifestyle changes. Relief washed over the little girl so suddenly that she burst into tears she had been holding back all day. Without hesitation, the carpenter knelt beside her until the crying stopped. It was the first time in years he had comforted a child. He didn't realize that, at that very moment, both their lonely lives had quietly begun moving toward the same destination.